Albany County Clerk's Office.
Hi, I just called the records department and they transferred me over to you. I'm trying to find a bankruptcy filing from 1997.
Okay, hold on 1 second, please.
I've been on the phone for about an hour now, and I keep getting transferred.
Okay, so again, I'm sorry that you keep getting switched, but you gotta call bankruptcy court.
Bankruptcy court.
I have a phone number for you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
I tend to go down rabbit holes. Well, more like fall into them. Whether it's a hobby like film photography or a fictional world like Warhammer 40k, I get this giddy feeling knowing I've just barely scratched the surface of this cool new thing. This past year's big rabbit hole is called Galactic Empires. Let me tell you about it. I found Galactic Empires by accident. It all started with Pay Money Wubby.
It's Magic Monday. I'm excited. Love me some Magic Monday.
Pay Money Wubby is a YouTuber and streamer who has occasional Magic Monday streams, where he opens new and vintage Magic cards. I was catching up on some of his older streams, and normally I skip his Magic content, but I decided to see what it was all about. I was instantly transfixed. The artwork, the design, the Wild West 90s attitude, it drew me in deep. So what could I do? Well, I could buy a booster box. Okay, never mind. Maybe not Magic the Gathering. So I went down a list of things I like. Pokemon's out of the question. I played my first game only a couple years ago and the game art is way better. Plus, Pokemon cards don't have that good 90s feel I crave.
It's time to
Yu-Gi-Oh! Was something I did play as a kid. I remember being so jealous of my friend's Blue Eyes White Dragon and another friend's Piece of Exodia. Of course, I had a Dark Magician, which unfortunately has not fared well over the years. The prices on eBay were not too bad. But I wasn't looking to spend the majority of my hobby money on some nostalgia-based gratification. Well, yet. Okay, nostalgia wasn't getting me anywhere, but eBay had other plans in mind. Due to my now furious searching of collectible card games, the site brought to my attention the Wheel of Time collectible card game. Months prior, I had been eyeing a few paperback book lots, but I ended up finding them at a local used bookstore. Prices for some of the sealed boxes are still kinda crazy. $500 for a sealed booster box for a game no one remembers? No thanks. But what's this? A starter deck for only $40? Sure, I'll do it. So not exactly what I'm looking for, but oh, hello. Enter Wyvern. Thank you, people who viewed this item also viewed. Wyvern ticked all the boxes. Weird art, check. Cheap price, check. 90s collectible card game, check. Let's get a booster pack and a starter deck. That should be really enough to satisfy me. And all of it for the low price of another 40-ish bucks? Another win. I check out a little more Wyvern, and then I made a scroll that will forever change my life. With one innocent spin of the scroll wheel, my eyes landed on a beautiful sight. Galactic Empires, CCG, Primary Edition Starter Box Basic Decks A and B, factory sealed. A gigantic dragon emblazoned the front of the box, breathing torrents of fire onto a seemingly doomed spacecraft. This is where it all started. Okay, so what is a collectible card game? I mean, I should probably know that. I'm trying to collect them. Well, in 1993, a brand new game changed the market forever. Magic the Gathering.
Magic is the ultimate battle of wits. There's no board. There's no monitor, no TV screen, no joystick, no special effects. No, it's just you and your friend locked in an intense battle of strategy and wisdom. Object of the game? Total annihilation of your opponent.
Created by Richard Garfield and produced by Wizards of the Coast, Magic sold like hotcakes when it was premiered at Gen Con in August of 1993. By the end of the following year, they had 5 expansions and had printed over 1 billion cards. CCGs are typically sold as starter decks with available booster packs sold on the side. Players construct their own decks according to the game's rules and compete against one another. One of the key gameplay mechanics Garfield used that set the game apart was that it had core rules, but whatever the card said specifically trumped anything in them. These used keywords and descriptions. By late 1994, Magic was no longer the only one on the market. Entering into the CCG world now were a few games including On the Edge, Super Deck, and, you guessed it, Galactic Empires. Back on eBay, I bought the starter deck A and B box. Then I bought another one. 2 Series 2 Primary Edition booster boxes, 1 Series 4 Powers of the Mind booster box, 1 Series 5 Timegate booster box, 1 C starter deck. Whew. I can't quite describe the feeling I had from finding this game. I have always wanted something to really dive into. I wanted an uncharted rabbit hole, somewhere I could boldly go, that no one has quite gone before. It's like finding out Sutter Kane is down at the used bookstore signing copies, or that I can prime a copy of Nukem the board game to my house for game night.
Nukem. Get them before they get you.
So with the eBay orders in, I waited.
Wyvern. This is West Side Wyvern. So the final thing I settled on is a game called Galactic Empires, the science fiction trading card game, Primary Edition. It is the first... Now, I didn't exactly hold it all for that stream. When it arrived, I tore into everything immediately. And then I ordered more stuff. But my curiosity did not stop with the cards in the game, which as of recording this, I still have not actually played. I wanted to know more about why it didn't succeed, and for that, I turned to Google. The first result was, of course, the Wikipedia page. Galactic Empires is an out-of-print collectible card game with a science fiction theme. It was published by Companion Games in 1994 until the company's bankruptcy in 1997. Following the success of the first collectible card game, Galactic Empires was one of the first wave collectible card games that followed. The first cards were designed by Carl Schulte and were released in August of '94. Companion Games filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in early '96 and continued to release products during its reorganization. This ended abruptly when the company filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in May of '97. The Wikipedia page didn't have quite enough info to satisfy me. I decided to go further. Maybe someone was attached to the copyright? My cursory searches landed me nowhere, so I knew I had to go deeper. Enter government bureaucracy. Copyright.gov's database gave me a few initial results. 2 artists. So I decided to contact one of them. Melissa Benson is an artist based in Connecticut. She has done art for several games including Magic the Gathering, Vampire the Masquerade, Shadow Fist, and you guessed it, Galactic Empires. I'm not exactly sure what I sent in the email to Melissa. Her website had one of those form submissions, and her reply did not include my initial query. I'm assuming it went along the lines of something like this. Hi Melissa, I was looking into an old collectible card game called Galactic Empires, and your name came up. Do you own the rights to this game, or know who might? Thanks, Will. Her response. Hey Will, so Galactic Empires. I do not own the game, but I do own the copyright on each of the images I did for the game. Why do you ask? Melissa. I explained to her I found her name in the art filing on copyright.gov and asked her if she remembered anything about her time working for Companion Games. And I get a response. Hey Will, it isn't a pleasant memory. Carl Schulte is let's just say he tried to pull a fast one. When he declared bankruptcy Chapter 11, he told his lawyer that he had the copyright to all the art, which was a lie. Ed Beard Jr. and I went to Albany, New York on the day of his hearing with our contracts in hand to prove otherwise, and to have the artists included as creditors since he hadn't paid the balance on the art at that point. Long story short, we were included as creditors and we were paid. The court allowed him to continue to publish to make enough money to pay the creditors. After that, I don't know or care what happened to him. At this point, I was interested, but not ready to spend a huge amount of time looking into any of this. That is, until I read the very last line of her email. If I ever get the chance for payback, Believe me, I will take it. I was stunned. I thought I would get an, "Oh, it's an image copyright, no clue who owns the full rights," but I got a somewhat heated reply. After hearing this from her, I wanted to reach out to the other artists she mentioned to see if they had a similar experience. And boy. I wasn't going to include my replies from Ed Beard Jr. since he threatened legal action if I misquote him. So I'm just going to display and read them exactly as he told me to. 1. All companion games art contracts were licensing contracts. Artists never surrendered copyright and have retained copyright since the creation in the 1990s. 2. Companion games paid only some of the monies owed on the art license, then filed bankruptcy Chapter 11 and as consequence failed to pay royalties owed. 3. Several artists petitioned the court through a motion in opposition to the bankruptcy filing in an attempt to gain secure creditor status and eventually get paid. However, the court ruled that due to the executory contract nature or royalties-based license agreements, bankruptcy courts do not grant secure creditor status regardless of whether the largest amount of money owed was to the artist. 4. Artists continue to maintain full copyright protection to any and all art that was created for this game to this day. No reproduction or use of any art used or contained within the game is permissible to be used without written consent of the individual artists whose names are conspicuously placed on the bottom of each card printed. This is all I will comment on the topic. Good luck, Ed Beard Jr., 1994 to 95 acting art director, artist liaison, and contract creator for Galactic Empires / expansions. With those kind of responses, I was 100% on board on figuring out just what happened to Galactic Empires and just who Carl Schulte is. With nothing but free time on my weekends, I dove back down deep into the rabbit hole of Galactic Empires. It was during this time that I met Eric Smith. Eric had a few box breaking and pack cracking videos on his YouTube channel that I watched religiously when I was waiting for my cards to arrive. It was also through this that I discovered the Galactic Empires Museum, of which he is the curator. This website rules. It has every Galactic Empires card sorted by whatever you want, be it series, type, rarity, or artist. Other than having all the card info, he lays out the detailed information about each expansion and dabbles in speculating about how some of the cards were printed. Now, back before I reached out to Melissa and Ed, I had actually joined a Facebook group dedicated to Galactic Empires. I'm not on Facebook at all really these days, but the community that is there is so warm and welcoming, it's awesome to see people excitedly chatting about a game that's been dead for over 20 years. Eric Smith was also over in the Facebook group, so I shot him an email seeing if he had any info on who may own the copyrights to the game. Eric got back to me fairly quickly. He said unfortunately he didn't have contact with anyone from the company. He had talked with Andrew Smith, the Universe Editions art director, but lost touch over a decade ago. However, he did manage to turn up a possible phone number for him. As for Carl Schulte, he said he never spoke with him, and about the rights to the game, he left me with this. Your best bet for finding the rights holder, if you really want it, should be to contact the court that handled the bankruptcy, which would be somewhere in or around Stamford, New York. Unfortunately, 25-year-old bankruptcy records are almost certainly going to be in storage and not online, and cost some money to get court records of. So, no luck getting in contact with Carl Schulte directly, but perhaps I can find out if Andrew Smith knows anything. I'm a millennial though, which means I have crushing anxiety about calling a phone number, so I texted it instead. With that out of the way, I went back online to track down some more information. Using all the stuff I already knew, I did manage to turn up an article from a GeoCities website about collectible card games. Ralph and Jackie's Galactic Empires site is a blast from the past. I'm not sure why graphic design ever moved past GeoCities, but we need to go back there immediately. I mean, look at these websites. Anyways, where was I? Right, the very first paragraph on the site explains that companion games no longer exist, and that the people behind companion games and Galactic Empires have formed a new company called Component Game Systems. This wasn't the first time I had seen Component Game Systems. The Wikipedia page also mentioned them, but neglected to say it was started by the same people. Designer Carl Schulte had expressed hope that Component Game Systems would purchase companion games and continue the game, but this did not happen. So now I know Carl seemingly tried to buy himself and Galactic Empires out of their own bankruptcy, but also he continued working after Galactic Empires finished. Back on Ralph and Jackie's site, I found some more articles written about Galactic Empires. The first was titled Interview with Companion Games, March 7th, 1997. Ralph interviews Carl Schulte about the company, and we learn some interesting tidbits about the game. We actually formed to produce a line of supplements, or as they call them, empires, for the company that produces the game Galactic Empires is based on, Task Force Games Starfleet Battles, recalls companion president Carl H. Schulte. Then what happened was when Magic hit the scene, I said with the history of this game, I could develop my own spacefaring collectible card game. That's how Galactic Empires was born. It was also because of this history of Starfleet battles that we were able to get Galactic Empires out so fast. We were the second game out on the market in 1994. He goes on to explain that every store ordered a ton of cards because Magic had taken off so quickly. Surely another card game would bring in the cash. The unfortunate downside, Schulte explains, is the alpha and beta sets were only 90 cards, so there was a good chance you would get all of the cards after only a few packs. Next, it mentions the Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing in 1995. Schulte explains to Ralph that, "That's the problem we're still having," says Schulte. "A printer we used for primary didn't back up the cards right, and we ended up having to take a lot of product back." Despite this, Ralph mentions that he is surprised Galactic Empires has survived when so many of the top competitors who were making a lot bigger card games have folded and gone away. The reason we survived when the glut hit, the players who bought the game were very faithful. They loved the game and stuck with it and continued to buy. I feel our faithful core following is the only reason we continue to survive. That loyalty is still alive today on the Facebook group and the museum website. It's easy to be nostalgic for things still in print like Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh!, but Galactic Empires is still talked about by these fans 26 years after the printers stopped. The interview ends with a peek into the next expansions for Galactic Empires, the 12th, 13th, and 14th at this point: Cyberspace, Realm of the Ancients, and Comedy Club 4. Unfortunately, here in the future, we know none of these happened. The game's final expansion would be Series 11, Allied Forces, in December of 1996. With the promises of a bright future and our knowledge of the reality, we move on to the next article just 3 months later. Companion Games files for Chapter 7, June 20th, 1997. Here I finally get the first bit of information on why the bankruptcy had occurred in the first place. For the past 16 months, Companion Games Incorporated has been under a supervised reorganization due to the bankruptcy of several accounts. A German distributor owing over $70,000 and the damages in excess of $400,000 caused by a large quantity of flawed primary edition product printed, paid for, but never replaced. So it seems the downfall of the company was nearly $500,000 they were owed from a bad print job and also a distributor in Germany. So after a few hours of research, I was nowhere closer to who might own the rights to the game after the court case was resolved. At this point, I was beginning to daydream about looking through some basement archive full of dust and grime for those bankruptcy records, and set to work. I had at least a little information to go off of. I knew Carl Schulte was the owner of the company when it went bankrupt, and was hoping that his new company, Component Game Systems, would buy them out. I also knew the proceedings were in New York, and according to one of the artists, it was in Albany. Although Eric thinks it was closer to Stanford, since that's where the company is officially listed on all the boxes. So with no option to text the government, I got started calling.
Albany County Clerk's Office.
Hi, I just called the records department and they transferred me over to you. I'm trying to find a bankruptcy filing from 1997.
Okay, hold on 1 second, please.
My first call wasn't hugely successful. It started with a bunch of transfers, and then it was a lot of typing names into a keypad, which honestly isn't my strong suit.
Carl Schulte.
Please call back later. Goodbye.
No.
Bankruptcy Court.
Finally, a human.
Hi, I'm having trouble with the records search and I'm trying to find a bankruptcy record from 1997. Is that possible to get some help?
Okay. What are we looking for?
Unfortunately, she also could not find any information relating to Carl or Companion Games. But she did give me the number for 2 other offices I can check, Poughkeepsie and White Plains.
But I think Poughkeepsie first. I would try there.
So call Poughkeepsie and just give them the same information I gave you?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you so much for your help.
Okay, have a good day.
You as well. Woo! Where are we going? I'll give them a call in a second. I gotta do actual work first. Okay, here we go. Poughkeepsie. Hi, I'm trying to find bankruptcy records from 1997, and I was directed here from the Albany office.
From 1997.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have those. They destroy them after 20 years.
Uh-oh. Long story short, there was no luck on call number 3. The incredibly kind and patient woman with whom I was speaking told me the ins and outs of the system, and basically any office in the Southern District I called, it would lead back here.
Okay, so I'll try to look this up some more, and I'll probably give you a call back.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your help.
No problem. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
After the third call, I got suspicious. Why is there no record? I mean, something should be coming up. I did a little more sleuthing and found a database of corporations on a New York government website. I found an entry tied to Galactic Empires. One was Companion Games, founded on October 26, 1994 by, excuse me? Carl H. Schultz. A different spelling. So I called the Poughkeepsie office right back and nothing. No records. But I've got one last place to check with this new name. Albany.
Bankruptcy court.
Hi, I called earlier today trying to look up some bankruptcy filing information. I was wondering if I could search a new name?
A different name?
A different name.
It hadn't occurred to me that when I first searched that there could have been a different spelling for the name, but now that seemed obvious with the corporation records I found. But stuff doesn't always work out the way you think. Instead of searching the new name, our intrepid government employee decided to search SCHU and CAR instead, and we got a hit.
Okay. So I do have a Carl H. SCHULTE.
That's amazing.
There was a case number. Unfortunately, though, she hit me with some bad news.
And that is all I have, and I don't have any information because the case is so old.
Gotcha. What's my next steps to try to get that from an archive?
I honestly do not think it's even in the archive. I think they were holding things for 20, but I don't think they're doing 20 years anymore.
Okay.
But there was still a tiny bit of hope. She transferred me to a supervisor, so with the case number in hand, I waited on hold. Eventually, a man named Ed answered. I recorded our call, but he's just too quiet for you to comfortably listen in on. He did, however, impart that the case was gone, destroyed after the 20-year mark. Despite the records being destroyed, though, he did still have the case docket as well as the matrices. A case docket is a summary of official proceedings, stuff that would be more detailed in the actual court case file. Matrices are just all contact information for everyone involved in the case. Even Sears was on it, although there was no sign of Roebuck. I hate to disappoint, but the docket summary really didn't have a lot of details. Motions by one side, extensions by the other. There was mention of a Bondcraft Inc., which as far as I can tell printed the cards. They were acquired at some point by another company. I emailed them, and they unfortunately no longer have access to those files. Ed also mentioned, and the dockets confirmed, that both cases were dismissed and the trustees were discharged. Neither dockets mentioned who the rights went to or if any resolution at all was found. So with all the information under my belt, I eventually headed over to the Facebook group to see what was going on and to update them on my search. That is when I saw this post by a member. From Paul Camo, hey everyone, I'm writing a book on 90s TCGs and I'm interviewing Carl Schulte from Companion Games in November. If you have any questions you'd like me to potentially ask, this is the thread to share them. Questions for Carl Schulte? Well, I had a few. Now before we get to this interview business, I can hear you saying, Will, what about the number you texted? Well, I did indeed get a response from Andrew. We chatted over Discord for a little bit, but he didn't want to do a recorded interview. I learned some interesting tidbits though, like how they would generate 3D art and assign it a fake artist name, but ultimately it wasn't anything really relevant to our story. So, back on Facebook, I commented on Paul's post about interviewing Carl. I mentioned I had dug up old bankruptcy documents and had been chatting with Andrew Smith on Discord. After some back and forth, he agreed to set me up with an interview if I provided him with the bankruptcy documents I turned up, which I did. I was finally in contact with the creator himself, Carl Henry Schulte. Carl joined the call on a black screen with the top 75% of his face visible. I asked him to move the camera down a bit. He tried, but then we moved on and started the interview. A bit of it is edited for clarification since both of our audio came out terribly.
I'm not a tabletop card guy. I was just ordering it off eBay and I scrolled down and landed on the artwork.
I re-recorded some of my dialogue and cut around the weird dips and peaks of Zoom. Before the formal questions, Carl and I chatted briefly about what he's been up to since Galactic Empires, before we dove into how everything got started.
Well,
I was publishing supplementary products for Starfleet Battles, and that was a tabletop game where you could play Starfleet ships in battles. And then a friend told me about Magic. I never played it. He just explained that it was like trading cards, and you would collect the cards and build a deck to play. And I kind of started chewing in my brain. I said, we could adapt the empires that we did for Starfleet Battles and put them into a card game format. And when we released Galactic, that kind of exploded immediately. It was either the second or third game to hit the shelves after Magic. With that cash flow, we were able to say, okay, time to quit the day job, go full time, hire some people, and expand into a real operating company. I think one of the big strengths of Galactic is the fans were so supportive and connected to the game that we sold a lot of product because of that dedication to the game. Where we didn't have the marketing budget to reach all the people out there, but the ones that did play were very, very supportive.
So what was your initial vision for Galactic Empires? Did it become more of like a money-making thing at the time, or was it more like, this is fun even though the cash isn't rolling in sort of thing?
It was really never about the money. We always wanted to make a great game, and I think that's one of the reasons it stuck as well as it did, because we never created a situation where every new set had a bunch of power cards you had to have to stay competitive. You could play with just a universe deck against someone who's got every single card and be just as competitive and still defeat them. So our game was very well balanced and logical and worked. It was, there's no broken aspects to it, and that was always a priority, to make the game, one, fun, and two, balanced and playable. We didn't want arguments and players throwing drinks at each other across the table in some sort of an argument over bad rules in the game. So we were always very meticulous about that.
What got me down this whole rabbit hole is I had originally reached out because I was trying to find who owned the copyright to Galactic Empires. I ended up emailing some artists who were not happy that I brought anything Galactic Empires up, which led me to the whole bankruptcy thing.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, we had a very stable, doing quite well game company. It wasn't big and gigantic or anything, but it was good and stable. But there came a point where the big players, the Hasbros and the Fleer and Marvel and Topps were looking at what we were doing, saying, hey, we need to move into this space. So they came in with, and probably the biggest killer was a Star Wars collectible card game. These big companies did not know how to build stable collectible card games. And they didn't want to take the time to build them or hire the right people to help build them. They just, picked somebody, say, hey, go play that game 2 or 3 times and then make one. So the games they published ended up being extremely broken and not playable, even though they had, the famous characters, Luke Skywalker and all those guys. The other thing, because they were so big, they were able to force the retailers to pay in advance for the product, and that there would be no refunds. So the retail stores were like, well, this is going to be the next huge big thing. It's going to be bigger than Magic. We're going to have to bite the bullet and buy as much as we can. So they did that. And I think a week before Star Wars hit, I had done a release. And my releases typically would sell about 80% through, and then over 2 or 3 months, the last 20% of the print run would disappear and get to the point. So we were basically printing enough to sell out. So what happened is we did our typical 80% got shipped out on that order, and it's come 30 days, retailers were not paying. And we get to 45 days, and I'm starting to call around saying, hey, what's up?
The answer Carl got back wasn't good. As it turns out, the hot new Star Wars collectible card game wasn't very good and wasn't selling.
So very quickly, the players figured out we're not going to waste money on that. So they were stuck with tons and tons of boxes of this stuff that they couldn't sell, and they couldn't convince people to play. And then I'm like, well, give me the product back. And he says, I can't, I sold it all. We sold through, and we took the cash, we bought Star Wars, didn't expect there to be an issue, but now and I think about 70% of the retail stores ended up closing up during the collapse of the card game industry. So obviously we were nailed by that. If a bunch of your accounts go bankrupt and don't pay you, and you can't pay your artists their royalties either. We used Chapter 11 for a while to keep things going, but unfortunately we couldn't meet the milestones. So even though we were doing pretty good, again, on sales and releases, we couldn't quite meet the milestones. So the judge closed it down.
How do you think Galactic Empire should be remembered?
I mean, I'm very proud of it. I think that the players really enjoyed it. I'm very thankful that how much love and dedication the players gave to the game. We would have these retreats. We'd rent this ski lodge in the Adirondacks in October before the snow hit, and we'd have 200 to 300 people show up that were all Galactic Empires only. It was the whole purpose of the weekend. So it was pretty special. And I think even, maybe not as much now, but for a long time at the different conventions, there was always a strong presence for Galactic Empires tournaments. So anyway, I'm very thankful to be able to have enjoyed doing that for a living for 7 or 8 years. So the players are the ones I have to thank for that. I always get frustrated. People say, "Oh, that's just Magic in space," and it couldn't be farther from the truth. Everything about it was 100%, 180 degrees different than the Magic. So, other than that it had cards, that was the only similarity. And I'm not saying Magic was a bad game, but this was definitely not Magic in space. That's the point.
And that was it. Interview over. Carl hit a lot of points we slowly uncovered throughout this video, but it was satisfying to hear it from the man himself. The loyalty of the fans was even something he thinks back on all these years later. Carl strikes me as a guy who is extremely proud of the work he and his team did on Galactic Empires, and sorry that it didn't work out. The artists I spoke to also have the right to be upset with him. I never got into the finer business dealings in our interview, but shady tactics or not getting paid for your work sucks. And from what I can tell, the reasoning behind the bankruptcy, the bad print job, the German distributor, and finally the retailers not paying what they owed is satisfactory enough to me in showing what truly caused the downfall of this game. It failed because of bad business, nothing new. I slowly started writing this video, bought more cards, showed them to friends, and went on with my life. Of course, my craving for all things collectible card games has not ceased since delving into the depth of the Galactic Empire rabbit hole. I have emerged bruised and battered with other games like Guardians, Wyvern, Star of the Guardian, as well as MetaZoo and even the great forbidden beast itself, Magic the Gathering. But Galactic Empires will remain my first love, my entrance to this world of collecting and trading silly rectangles of paper. So if you see a pack in the wild, think of me when you open it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, go ahead and check out some of the other videos on our channel, give it a like, and subscribe. I'm sure you'll love all of them. And finally, don't forget to check us out on twitch.tv/subpixelteam. We may even be live right now.